Welcome to today's webinar. Before our presenters get started, I wanted to notify you that Syngenta, as host, will record the webinar via Zoom, and the recording will be emailed out to attendees and published on our website and social media feeds after the event. No recording by anyone else or by other means is permitted. If you'd like to ask a question, I have set the Zoom Q&A function so that you may do so privately by addressing your question to the panelists and not to everyone. If you have questions about Syngenta's data privacy practices, please see our privacy policy, which is available at syngentaflowers-us.com/privacy-policy. And now I will hand it over to our presenter.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our last day of webcast at Syngenta Flowers. I'm Amy Briggs-Maka, Product Manager for the Vegetative Spring Annuals, and I'm so happy to be here at our beautiful Syngenta Flowers headquarters here in Gilroy, California. So this morning's all about lantana. We are super proud to be the market leaders in this important plant class, supported by the incredible breeding work of our one and only Wendy Bergman. Also adding to our conversation today, we'll be joined by our favorite tech expert, Dr. Harvey Lang. He'll be here to share with us some tips on preventing flowering cycling and garden longevity with your lantana. So as a reminder, everybody, our chat room is open. We're ready to answer any questions you may have as we cover all things lantana. So let's start here with our best-selling lantana series. This is Bandana. We continue to focus on selecting bandana varieties for really mounded but upright habits with a good medium vigor. We like to look for large blooms that sit on top of the foliage. We don't want flowers that are buried underneath the plant, and a really nice dark glossy foliage. And then, not to mention, we also look for that outstanding heat tolerance for the ultimate summer loving garden performance. Flower sterility to prevent cycling is always a plus with lantana, but as you'll hear from Dr. Lang, it's not the only factor to consider for consistent flowering. So our goal here is always to select the best varieties with the best vigor and matched habits. So new for our 2021 lineup, we have this great addition to the Bandana series. This is Bandana Gold. Again, with large blooms, it's early to flower and really well-branched habit. This is a great upgrade for anyone who is using older non-patented genetics for the gold color class. So with the addition of Bandana Gold, we now have 12 great varieties in the Bandana series. So if you're not sure where to start, make sure to check out our catalog. We have our all-star selections in the catalog that's noted by the star icon next to the varieties. These are our picks for well-matched varieties and best-selling colors. Okay, moving on to our Bandito series. These guys are small on size, but big on impact. The Bandito series was designed for high density production, definitely for large packs and 1-quart containers. They are perfect for southern growers looking for simple and well-matched production for your early spring programs. You northern growers may find that you struggle a bit with Banditos. They really need good light intensity and warm temperatures to quickly fill in. So if you're up north with cooler conditions, best to stick with bandanas for your first round of spring production. In the Bandito series, we've got 2 great items to add to the lineup. We've got the new Bandito White. This is an important color addition to the series. You can see it's got that great branching on a compact plant. And then we've got Bandito Yellow. So this was an improved from the old Bandito Yellow for a little bit better vigor, as you can see here, but still in profile for tidy plants and small containers. So with these new intros, Bandito line now has 6 colors. So it's a very easy to put together a super program for large packs and small pots. So if Banditos are Bandana's little sister, then Bandolero is the big brother in the family. Selected for more vigorous habits than bandanas, bandoleros are a great choice for northern growers that may struggle to get bandanas up to size for that first push of spring product. They're about 30% more vigorous, and these varieties have great upright habits, large flowers that sit on top of dark green foliage. Bandolero Pineapple is one of my very favorite varieties in the series, and it's definitely the prototype for Bandolero. It also happens to be a sterile selection, so that will help the plants from setting seed and cycling out of flower if you put them in the landscape. So that gives us 6 great colors in the Bandolero series. Their vigorous varieties are perfect for 2.5 quarts, large containers, and by the way, fantastic planted in landscapes. So speaking of great lantana varieties specifically for landscape use, this perfect segue for landscape bandana series was designed to fit that bill. These varieties are selected for vigorous spreading habits. Landscape bandana provides maximum coverage and maximum color, with one plant that can spread up to 3 feet in the ground when planted in ground. This year, we've got an important improvement on the Landscape Bandana Gold that you see over here. It's offering that same great spreading habit, but this upgrade is a bit more tidier with a lot more color on top of the plant. Gold Improved is also a sterile selection, so that really helps to ensure maximum color throughout the summer in the landscape. And then, of course, saving the best for last, this is Hot Blooded. Talk about a showstopper. Hot Blooded is always the standout variety in our trials, and you can see it's got a bit more of a mounded round habit than bandana, but what really stands out with Hot Blooded is look at the mass of flowers on these plants. It just keeps on going. So one note about this flower color, light intensity is key to get this very dark red color. In springtime greenhouse production, you may notice flowers are expressing a little bit more orange, but you get this baby out into full light and these flowers just pop. Especially if you have the benefit of cooler night temperatures in the summer, you get that really dark red intense color. Hot Blooded is also a sterile variety, so that again will help to prevent plants from cycling in and out of flower when the summer conditions get really tough. So I think with that, we have the perfect segue to hand off to Dr. Harvey. He's going to share with us some great tips on, again, managing cycling in lantana. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Amy. I'm Harvey Lang. I'm Senior Technical Lead here at Syngenta. I'm here in front of our beautiful Syngenta lantana varieties, and I'm going to give you some grower tips. One is on how to better keep your lantana in flower continuously. But first, I want to talk a little bit of what we do with guaranteeing to get great looking cuttings to growers. We really work hard on that. Lantanas are one of the more difficult varieties to ship cuttings, and we do a couple things. We make sure our stock plants are well fed and we harvest the plants at the right time. And also we include ethyl block sachets. You'll see some of these in the slide, but they're small little packets. They contain chemicals that actually absorb ethylene. And that helps prevent leaf drop on lantana cuttings after growers receive them, which is a major problem. So we work really hard at guaranteeing great looking lantana cuttings. And of course, we have great varieties. So with that, I want to go ahead and talk a little bit about some things on preventing what we call flower cycling, or flower cycling of lantana and other plants where they go in and out of flowering. And lantanas are woody plants. They're relatively slow grower compared to a lot of other plants that we sell, like petunias or calibrachoa. And with that, they're rather slow on putting new growing points on. That's where the flowers appear. And we did a lot of work on this, and we've seen over the years that lantana in general, because they're kind of woody and slow grower, they tend to go through these cycling periods. They want to come into flower and then maybe go a little out of flower and back in. And we did some work several years ago in the South, of course, where lantana love to grow, they love the heat, to try to figure out how can we make recommendations from a technical side to prevent flower cycling. And we found a couple of things that made a big difference. And one I'm going to talk about is adequate nutrition. And we found that when lantana were not adequately fertilized, whether from liquid fertilizer or what we call controlled release fertilizer, CRF, which is very popular in the South, that when those levels got very low or the growers just weren't fertilizing, that the lantana would go out of flower. And of course, later on, they would get flowers, but you'd have this down period. And a lot of time the foliage would be pale colored. Sometimes you'd get leaf curl. And we did experiments where we actually upped fertility, both from liquid feed, and we did some separate trials and experiments with higher rates of CRF, controlled release fertilizer. And it made a huge difference in keeping lantana flowering continuously. And this is both at the production level for the grower and also out in the landscape for consumers. If they can go in there and just make sure those plants have adequate fertility, either with liquid or just putting a little bit of slow release on periodically, you'll have much better results. So adequate nutrition will really help prevent cycling of all lantana varieties. And the other thing, the last thing I want to talk about that we found out from the trials was when lantana go completely dry, or when they go through a lot of drought stress, especially when they're wilting and when they're in flower, the flowers can shatter very easily. We see that similar with some of our, there's geraniums that are single flowering, and when they get dry and you move things around, or even from water irrigation that knocks the flowers off, you just have a green plant. Things like geraniums, they're softer and faster growing. They can put on new flowers pretty quickly. But lantana, when they lose those flowers and they're shattered because they're wilted down, they're green and they take a long time to come back into flower. Again, that's what's caused this flower cycling. So the key here is just, we tell growers and homeowners, again, even though lantana are very drought tolerant, they can take drought, rarely kills the plants, you will lose the flowers, because once the flowers are there and the plant wilts down a few times, the flowers shatter, they're gone. And again, because it's a woody plant and because it's a little bit slower in putting new growing points on, you get this down period with no flowers. So those are two key tips, I think, for keeping your lantana flowering, both in the greenhouse and also for homeowners who want that flowering continuing the whole year round. Lantanas do love the heat. They're very drought tolerant, but again, keep them well watered, keep the nutrition, you'll have a more floriferous plant.
Thank you, everybody, for joining our live webcast featuring lantana. With me today is Dr. Harvey. We've got a couple of live questions for you from our Q&A after this webinar, so thanks for being here with us. Here's the first question from a viewer. Do you recommend rooting hormone for lantana cuttings?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Lantanas are woody plants, so rooting hormone does help. You can use common rate is 1,000 parts per million IBA, but generally for southern growers or when it's really warm temperatures, I would say lantana is typically not used rooted with rooting hormone, but yeah, any kind of woody, slower rooting plant, rooting hormone will help. So it's always a good thing to try, but especially when the temperatures aren't quite as warm as they should be.
Okay, that's a really good tip. Thank you so much. Here's someone that comes from the Northeast. Let me ask this question. I grow lantana in the Northeast, and sometimes I have trouble getting it to size up in time. Which of your lantana series would you suggest? Good question.
Well, we have basically 4 series of lantanas. We have 2 that are on the smaller side called banditos and bandanas, but the 2 I think I would recommend for the north would be our newer genetic is the bandoleros. They're like a nice mounding bandana type, but with probably about 30% more vigor. So that's the one I think for 6-inch pots and gallons and baskets where you want that nice mounding habit. That's the one I would recommend for the mid and north climates in this Northeast that's being asked about. If you did want something that's a little bit more open or trailing, or you were using lantana in combos up in the Northeast, then the landscape bandanas are more vigorous trailing type. So either bandoleros or the landscape bandana would be the 2 series I would recommend.
Very cool. I love the bandolero. I think it's such a wonderful series. Perfect habit, one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another one about fertility. How much fertility is enough to keep lantana blooming? And what type of fertilizer should I use? That's a great one. We've got some great information on fertility in lantana.
Well, we've done a lot of work and trials on fertility of lantana, primarily to see if that makes an influence on how they continues to bloom or go in and out of bloom. And it is important, I'll just start with that lantana have to be very well fertilized to keep them in bloom. We select for sterility and plants, varieties that do continue to bloom, but fertility is important. As far as the type of fertilizers, there's 2 general types. There's liquid soluble fertilizers, and then there's what we call CRF or control release fertilizers. Talking about the liquid fertilizers, there's common types. I would say for lantana, since they're kind of woodier and slower growing, that probably something like a 20-10-20 or a 17-5-17. They've got a little bit more ammonium in them that pushes the growth. So that's something that's good, and that type of fertilizer stays in the media, and that's what you want. You want this higher fertility in the soil for lantana. When it comes to the slow release types, the control release types, there's a whole range out there in the South where I'm at in Florida. Control release fertilizers are probably the most common type that are used. And there's different types, but I would say generally in the range of 5 to 6 pounds per cubic yard of control release fertilizer. It's incorporated in the media.
Incorporated into the media, not as a top dress.
Yeah, you could top dress. Typically, it's that rate can vary just depending on the size of the cake, but normally it's incorporated. So I would say 5 to 6 pounds per cubic yard, and generally the type of that fertilizer I see most common is what we call a 180-day release or a 5 to 6 month.
Okay.
There's common types, even consumers could get a 3 to 4 month Osmocote, Nutricoats, or Polyon or types. But that's the rates, 5 to 6 pounds per cubic yard on control release. And the liquid fertilizer, the 20-10-20 or 17-5-17, probably more at the rate of 200 to 250 parts per million nitrogen.
Okay.
Nearly every irrigation.
Yeah, so
and I think,
constantly fed.
Yeah, and I think growers or even consumers who do that will really see a really nice performance with their lantana, especially in regard to keeping them in bloom so they don't cycle in and out.
Right at that time of retail push, right?
Absolutely,
Perfect.
absolutely, and it'll darken the foliage. Just, yeah, I think lantanas are tough. They can get away with low feed, but for their overall best performance, you'll see a difference with the higher feed.
Great tip, Harvey. How do you get the most red color on our hot-blooded lantana. Such a cool variety.
Yeah, hot-blooded.
How do you make it the most red it can be?
Good genetics. That's what we have.
That's true.
There's genetics that's part of that. Hot-blooded is just a standalone red, but it can vary in the color. We've seen that in landscapes, and there's 3 things we've kind of found over the years. And I think the most important, it's hard to weigh each of those, but you have to have high light. So very high light levels, which lantana light tends to bring the reddest color out of all the red types of lantana, but especially hot-blooded. We found here, really through our research in Gilroy, where we have these cooler nights, that this high light combined with some cool nights, doesn't have to be real cool, but if it can get into the low to mid 60s at night for 7, 8, 9 days, that helps. And this fertility I was talking about, that's the 3rd component.
Okay.
And you really need to keep the plants fertilized. And we do find on hot-blooded that if the plants, even under high light and these decent temperatures, if you don't fertilize, like I mentioned in the last segment, the color gets a little bit more orangey red. So high fertility, high light, and if you can drop the night temperatures, at least for a period of time before you move into retail, you'll get the best.
Get that hot-blooded red. It's
Correct.
such a cool item. Let's see. Here's another really good fertility question. Would you recommend producing lantana with CRF or liquid fertigation? I have customers both in the north and the south.
I would say overall lantana most commonly is probably produced in most of the areas of the U.S. with just common liquid feed. That's typically what most greenhouse growers use. You can vary the rates or use that on a wide range of products. I would say I would continue for mid and northern growers to use liquid feed because that's readily available. It's a soluble fertilizer. Control release fertilizers, typically their release rate of fertility and nitrogen is based on temperatures, and you have to have soil temperatures at a certain level. Depends on the manufacturer. It could be a certain release rate at 70 degrees average temperature or 75 to 80 degrees. So where I'm at again in the south, it's control release fertilizers that are most commonly used because you do have the warm temperatures that will get this release rate and you'll get the fertility out. So mid and north, liquid feed for sure. Could be used in the south. Really need to keep it going.
Sure.
But then this control release fertilizer, I'd probably more keep that for the south just because you need the warmer temperatures.
Warm soil media.
Yeah, unless if you were in the north and that you were doing a summer program and temperatures were warm, you could. There's a blend of both of those where some growers, and even in the south where you have control release fertilizers that I said are very popular, you will see when they sell in the early season, temperatures are a little low and the plants will tell you that fertilizer is not releasing.
Sure.
So they will go in and with a liquid feed periodically.
Okay.
So now you have kind of a mix of both control release and the liquid feed.
Yeah,
so
makes a lot of sense.
Without being too confusing, that's how I would summarize it.
Got a lot of options for everybody.
Yes.
Here's a really fun one. Dr. Harvey, what's your favorite lantana?
Oh my goodness. I wasn't expecting that question. I love them all. I would say, at least color-wise, I think with the new hot-blooded, the red really comes out of, any kind of red type, but especially that one. As far as the type of lantana, I like the mounded types, the bandana or the bandolero. So you said what type of lantana, more of a mounding versus the sprawling, trailing types. I like the hot-blooded, the deep red, but I would say in my yard and what I have is the golds and the yellows. And I think they're probably pretty popular with consumers. I know the pink and the roses, but so yeah, to summarize, I'd say color-wise, my favorite is probably the yellows and the golds, maybe the hot-blooded for the red, and then the mounding type of the bandana or bandolero types.
No one asked me, but my favorite is Bandolero pineapple. I think it is such a great variety. It's really the prototype of the series, and it's
it's kind of in that
kind of
that goldy yellow color. Exactly.
Color.
Yeah.
Love it. Are lantanas good for mixed containers?
They are. We see them. I would say the most common types that are used are our landscape trailing types. It's kind of like geraniums, where I always tell people plant the most vigorous geranium in the combos with your verbenas and petunias and catabricos, because they can get easily overgrown. And I think using the manling type like a bandana or a bandito could easily be overgrown. Maybe the bandoleros that have a little bit more, but for sure, I think if you see our quick combos that we do and just custom combos that I see around, it's more these trailing type, and excuse me, that would be our landscape trailing types of lantana, more the vigorous types. They really can kind of work themselves through the other trailing material that's typically in those type of combos.
Very good. You did mention quick combos. You know, Syngenta Flowers are a leader in heat-loving quick combos, and we've got quite a few that include the bandana as a mixture. So be sure to check those out. Looks like that's all the questions we have from our audience today. So thank you everyone for joining our webcast sessions with our technical experts and our product experts. We look forward to seeing you. This is our last production for CAST 2021. We look forward to seeing you at Cultivate in Columbus, Ohio next week. And if there's any questions, please feel free to reach out to any of your favorite doctors at Syngenta, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks a lot.
Thank
Bye.
you.